Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breeze Time with Kathy. It's really good to join you again. I had a unique experience. I've done a lot of funerals in my time, but I had a really special experience. Yes, on Saturday, on October 31st, Halloween. Actually, it was the funeral service for a dear friend of mine. Her name is Clara Lumpkin Canistra. A few of you might recognize Clara. I've talked about her. She is a friend of mine. She lived about, how far away? Probably about 2.5 blocks from me. I didn't know that until one day I was working at the emergency department, and it's my job as an emergency room nurse, which I did full time until about a year ago when I retired from nursing. And I did this job part time for the last, it'll be 11 years in December, and as the chaplain here. But anyway, I took care of Clara one day when she came in because her blood pressure was high, and we hit it off, and she was 96 years old at the time. And I believe just getting ready, 95, ready to turn 96. And it was a real pleasure, and we hit it off, and we talked about a lot of different things. And I was surprised, but I talk to a lot of people. You can imagine, I talk. I'm the chaplain, and it serves me well in that purpose, and it worked pretty good when I was a registered nurse in the emergency department over at Alexandria Hospital. Well, as it turned out, Clara gave me a call about a week later. She called the hospital when I was on, and she asked to speak to me. And she said that she didn't have any family that lived locally, and she thought we got along quite well, and she'd like to ask me to be her medical POA, power of attorney. Well, that really surprised me because I haven't really had anybody ask me to do that before. It was kind of unusual. But I thought, I don't believe that woman certainly had, I know she was 95, but she certainly knew her own mind. But it is unusual, and I need to figure out a little bit more about it. So what I ended up doing was I said, well, why don't I come over and talk to you, Clara? And good grief, I'm reflected in the light. I'm sorry. It's probably very distracting for that light to shine in your eyes. So what I said was, Clara, I'll be glad to come to your house and talk to you about it. So she gave me her address. And lo and behold, she only lived 2.5 blocks from me. Neither she nor I knew that. And I thought, all right. So we set a time, and I went to talk to Clara. I visited in her house on North Early Street, which is, like I said, only a couple of blocks from my house. And we sat and we talked. And I find out that Clara is a widow. Her husband had passed away about 20 years ago now. He died of Alzheimer's. And she had lived alone since then in her house, a house they had bought, I think, in the early 1960s. And she was quite content to live there. It was very nice. And we chatted. She said she had a couple who are dear friends of hers who live locally, named Ed and Patty. And Ed and Patty have done a wonderful job handling her as her financial and medical POAs. However, they're traveling a lot. And at that time, they were on a trip to China. And she said, I really thought we hit it off, and I was wondering if you would be a sort of secondary medical POA, somebody who can speak for me, because I want to make sure that my wishes as a DNR are honored. She says, as a matter of fact, I've got a copy right here. And she handed me a copy. And then she said, I've also got a copy taped to the back, taped to the door. And she had a copy taped over her bed. And she had a copy taped to her refrigerator. And she had a copy taped on her back door. And she said, I don't want anybody to mistake the fact that I don't want to end up on a ventilator. I don't want to be resuscitated. I've had a good long life. And God willing, I'll die in my right mind in my sleep, is what she hoped for. Well, I understood that completely. It's the way my mother felt, and and I've talked to so many of you, and so many of you feel that same way. She wanted to die without any pain. She wanted to die with her right mind, and it would be just as well if she died in her sleep. Not a real surprise there. So I said, well, Clara, do you have any relatives? Because I couldn't talk to Patty and Ed. They were in China. But she told me about her nephew, Bob, who lived down in Talladega, Alabama. And I got his number, and I called him, and I talked to him about it. And he said, oh, yeah, Clara knows her mind. If she wants you to, that's fine. And I said, well, I don't want anything to do with Clara's money. I don't want to be managing anybody's money. But if she wants me to, and I had told Clara that too, and she said, no. She offered to pay me, and I said, no, I won't accept payment for it. If I do it, I'll do it on the basis of friendship. And I would want us to really become friends. And we did, by the way. So it became a wonderful relationship. After Clara had a fall, she did have to go to rehab, and then she wasn't quite ready to go home, so she stayed in the healthcare center for about 6 weeks, and then she moved on and eventually got back home. And Clara lived independently with some help coming in about 6 hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week, until just about 5 months ago. And 5 months ago, her health took a turn, and she really hit her decline. But she was absolutely adamant she wanted to stay in her own home. And fortunately, she had the financial resources to do so. She actually had long-term care health insurance, and she wouldn't use it. They tried to get her to start using it when she was in her 90s, and she wouldn't do it in her early 90s. And finally, when she was 99, she decided, about 99 and a half, she decided to start using her long-term care insurance. She said she wasn't ready yet. Well, she was ready then. For her 99th birthday, which was last year, November 15th, my son Michael got to know Clara too. And she really was quite a lot of fun. So what do you get someone for their 99th birthday? Well, Michael and I got her one of those electronic home assistants called an Alexa. And the thing that she loved about it was she could ask Alexa the time, and it would tell her the time. She would ask it the temperature. She liked that one too. She could also ask it to call me or call just a few people that she called a lot, and then she could just speak into the air, and that came in handy. And then she could also ask it to play music. And what she loved was jazz and Frank Sinatra and Louis Armstrong. Those are the things that she loved. My son Michael had gotten pretty close to her, and he installed it for her. And she really was something special. Well, about 5 months ago, Clara began to need 24-hour help. And she sat me down, and she wanted to make sure that we went over everything she wanted in her service. So yesterday, I had the unique experience of doing a service that was entirely planned. I've had people say they want this hymn or that reading, but I never had anybody who entirely planned the entire service before, but Clara did. It was a really joyous service. It was quite nice. And I think that's why I want to tell you about her. First, we started off with Louis Armstrong playing It's a Wonderful World. I bet y'all know that song. Here's a little piece of it. Let's see. Well, she wanted that song because she loved Louis Armstrong, because she thought it was a great song, but also because she felt like in her life she'd been blessed to live in a wonderful world, and especially to live in the United States. And she said, she always said she felt like she had lived in the best years to be an American. She wasn't so sure about things right now, but in the last 100 years, yes, that was the best time, she said, to be an American. Well, then she chose her scripture. And her scripture was, we went with the traditional hymn, Amazing Grace. Most of y'all know that one. Not in a very common choice for funerals. And her scripture that she wanted me to preach on was Ecclesiastes 3, which that is, to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to mourn, and a time to laugh. And it ends with, and God has made everything good in its time. So she wanted that scripture. She allowed me to preach on it. But she did write out her whole life story for me to read. And to tell you the truth, after I read it and shared with them her philosophy on life, which her philosophy on life was, she actually had told this to a doctor, so I knew it already. On her 99th birthday, when she had her checkup, the doctor happened to ask her, well, what do you eat for breakfast? And she told him, oh, I have kale and hummus for breakfast. And he goes, really? Clara was into organic food back as early as the 60s. And she said, yeah. And he said, well, is that the secret to your long life? And she went, no. As far as I'm concerned, the secret to a long life is to take life one day at a time and never give up on champagne and chocolate. And of course that got a big laugh, but it's the truth. She liked her champagne, and her friends, Ed and Patty, they would come over every Sunday, and every Sunday they'd have a little champagne and her favorite chocolate, which was dark chocolate covered almonds, organic, mind you, and a little bit of champagne. And she even had that up until the time she died. Within a week of when she died, was the last time she shared that. And she left specifics. She wanted all of us. She loved to dance. She and her husband used to belong to the polo club, and they used to go to the dances there. And actually, they had met at a YWCA dance many years ago. Of course, it was many years ago. She's 100, and anyway, 70 years ago, I suppose it was. Anyway, but her last song, well, when I preached the sermon, I basically said, you've just heard Clara's life story. You've heard how she dealt with difficult things. When her husband got Alzheimer's and she had to become his caregiver, she said everything changed. When this happened, everything changed. She let go of the past. She embraced the present. And she did whatever needed to be done. And even in the times that were painful, she moved past them. She found time to laugh again, to dance again. And she really enjoyed that. So I said, I don't really need to preach a sermon. I think Clara's a living example of someone who trusted in God to make everything perfect in its time. And in the meantime, she took it one day and embraced the seasons of life as they passed by, and never forgot the good things in life. Well, the last thing we did in that funeral was to listen to When the Saints Go Marching In. And, wait. She also loved Frank Sinatra. We had to hear My Way by Frank Sinatra, which of course spoke to her independent spirit. She was quite a successful businesswoman, also an investor, and she served on the board for the American Association of Independent Investors for over a decade. So she was really very active. But it just warmed my heart when she told me the final hymn she wanted. She wanted When the Saints Go Marching In, which in New Orleans is very traditional. We often play that. In the jazz funerals, when you march to you march very slowly, you lead going to the cemetery, and oftentimes they play Just a Closer Walk with Thee. Very, very sedate. You have the service at the graveside. The person is buried, but coming back from the graveside, you head out to celebrate their life, and that's what Clara wanted, was a celebration. So she chose When the Saints Go Marching In by Louis Armstrong. I'm gonna play a little bit of it here. Give me a minute. Oops, wrong one. There it is, When the Saints Go Marching In by Louis Armstrong. And of course, in New Orleans, you don't just sit down when this plays. If you were walking back from the cemetery, you'd either have an umbrella or you grab a white handkerchief and you would second line. What we did. We second lined all there at the funeral home, and everybody got up and everybody walked around the chapel and past Clara's cremains and her pictures, and we partied. Because that's what she wanted, to celebrate her life. Now, she had told her executor that he had to bring everybody who went to the funeral. He wanted them to go ahead. He wanted them to go ahead and, oops, I gotta end this. There we go. He wanted them to take everyone over to the Ritz-Carlton, and everybody was to have a drink and give her and toast her and have champagne and chocolates, and she was going to treat everybody to dinner. Well, of course, with COVID, we couldn't have the Ritz-Carlton, but I want you to know that everybody went home with a little gift bag with a little half a liter of champagne and Clara's favorite organic chocolate covered almonds. Dark chocolate, by the way. That's what she wanted. She wanted a celebration, and it happened to be, and she planned it down to all the music, all the scriptures. I didn't have to do any work because I didn't even have to preach much of a sermon, just share my thoughts on how Clara's life reflected an appreciation for dealing with what's right in front of you now. Whether it's something that breaks your heart and makes you cry, or something that gives you joy, then treasure what you learn from it and take each day one day at a time. And don't forget about the good stuff, especially champagne and chocolates. I hope you won't forget about the good things in your life either. Maybe it's not champagne and chocolates, but I hope it's something. And I hope that you too will feel that you have a life worth celebrating. And if there's things you wish could be different, well, if there's anything I can do, please let me help. But until then, God bless you and take care.